let's go back to your STEM origin story. Where did the passion for you to want to break down science education, like what started the path for you to get to where you are today?
Wow. Okay. Honestly, I don't remember ever not having a passion for STEM and for STEAM. And my ghost actually goes starts a few years before I was born. And my dad was an electronics genius. I mean, he was like the professor from Gilligan's Island. This guy could,
Nice.
take two turtle shells and a piece from the radio and build a nuclear reactor out of the thing. Okay. But he couldn't manage people well. And so he was an independent contractor, and he got a contract to design a bunch of power supplies, electronics for the Apollo project.
Hmm.
So he had to hire a lot of people quickly. This meant that he had to hire someone to supervise those people.
Hmm.
Well, he found this woman, Jean, and she was just coming off the Redstone project, which had
Oh
recently ended.
yeah.
And so they met, fell in love, built a whole mess of electronics for the shuttle. They actually got both of their names, they signed both their names inside of the power supply
Oh.
of the base of the LEM of Apollo 11.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So they were one of the first people to have their names on the moon. So it
Oh.
was totally undercover. They weren't supposed to do that.
I'm sure there were a
And
few of those for
yeah, yeah. And and so I just grew up around the space program, around science. And what's interesting, I was thinking about this recently, is that I do not ever once remember my father saying, let's sit down and learn this. Let's
sure.
sit down and study how blank works.
Right.
But what he did was, it was experiential.
Hmm.
We built radio controlled airplanes, for instance,
Cool.
by the dozen. And because of that, I
That's
learned aerodynamics.
yes.
You know, best way
Hmm.
to learn aerodynamics was by building airplanes that you could fly around the air or not.
Right. Right.
Depending on how well you
And you learned a
built
lot.
them. He learned a lot, right? And learned about propulsion and Newton's laws by building model rockets.
Yeah.
And we always had a telescope that we took out all the time, and so it was pretty amazing. And I so he was a huge influence on me, and another huge influence on me as a young kid was in fact Carl Sagan.
Mm.
And Cosmos came out when I was a little kid, and I just remember reading it and reading it and reading it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So many times I wore out the binding to four hardcover copies of the book.
Wow.
And of course the series came out, which was a huge hit. It was the first science series ever, to
Yeah.
become such a huge hit. Cosmos, the book, was the first science book ever to sell 500,000 copies.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, when I got older, I realized that what was so amazingly cool about Cosmos was that Carl Sagan was not sitting there saying, "Oh, well, the surface of Mars is approximately 25% iron oxide, accounting
Right.
for its reddish color."
Yeah.
And he was he was using the greatest technology of his time, which
Mm.
was television, to bring people to Mars.
Yeah.
He would say, "Come walk with me. We're we're gonna strew
Yeah.
across the surface of the red planet
Hmm.
and walk up to the Viking landers."
That's awesome.
That
Yeah.
was something which had really never been done before.
Hmm.
And I am convinced that if Sagan were alive today, he would be enthralled by the idea of 3D environments,
Mm,
metaverses, and
yeah.
expanding that,
Yeah.
and that's really what I'm seeking to do is to use these environments and these technologies to humanize science education, tearing down another huge wall,
Mm.
another huge barrier to science education.
And
And
literally in some senses, right? Literally metaphorically.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and it's such a great tool. I mean, so communicating science is a very different thing than learning science in some
yeah,
ways, at least especially in the traditional sense. Like going to school to learn science does not necessarily mean that you can communicate it or that it's even communicated well to you, which was some of my experience,
hmm,
which definitely is part of the reason why I podcast like I do now. Uh, but so that's an amazing background. That it's cool to think about. Your example seems very much like a great example of what happens if there is that scientific education available all the time, and that it's
mm,
just a part of your daily experience. How much we could all learn from just doing and seeing what it does in real life.
sure, sure. And and I hope that by by breaking down some of these as many barriers as possible
Mm,
to science education by increasing the amount of knowledge that people have out there.
yeah.
um, it's certainly going to help deal with, I think, a lot of the really important issues that we have in the world today. But more importantly, it is not it's not so important to learn facts
Mm,
as it is to learn how to think critically.
mm.